Okay, we're going to try to get you out of here today. It looks like we've already lost a good chunk of people who are afraid the Baptists are going to beat them to the buffet. So, and the rest of you don't need to go to a buffet, right? What is it Paul said? I buffet my body. So just remember, when the famine comes, I'm lasting longer than all the rest of you. So. Well, we talk each week about the convergence of events. This week we called it Watchmen, because that's what we are here. We're looking at the things that are going on in the world as the stages are being set for the ultimate fulfillment of Bible prophecy and the return of Jesus Christ to deal with his enemies, to pour out his wrath, and to set up his millennial kingdom. We look at a lot of different things. I love the guy at Investors Business Daily, Ramirez. This is a picture of a certain presidential candidate waiting for the other shoe to drop. How many shoes are there? And I think it's indicative of our country when these type of things happen and it doesn't seem to make any difference. This is an interesting chart. Now, I put this in because some of my friends who are believe that America is the final Babylon of prophecy, and they make a pretty compelling case. I grant them that. I put this in because this makes them all excited, and it upsets the people that think that Europe is the final Babylon of Bible prophecy. And it's a little hard to see, but what this chart does, it comes from Goldman Sachs, and what they did was they looked at the market capitalization, the value of equities in each European country. Then they came to America and looked for, okay, what companies do we have to put together to equal that value? So, in other words, what companies in America will equal all of the market capitalization of the stocks owned in certain European countries? For example, down here we have Spain has a net value in its capital markets of $742 billion. So that means that Apple is worth as much as all the wealth in Spain. Okay? So if you go to France, they have about 2.1 trillion. So you would need Apple, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and General Electric. And just those 5 companies, you would equal all the value of the stocks in France. And the reason this is important is it shows that America has vastly more wealth than all the other countries of the world. France is hardly a backwater country. If you go up here to Ireland, their market cap is $75 billion. That's equal to Starbucks. This is interesting. I think it's interesting. Germany, it would take Apple, ExxonMobil, Walmart, General Electric, and Procter & Gamble. Would equal Germany's market cap. Australia, about 100 billion. MasterCard. Italy, 627 billion. Microsoft and Walmart. So that gives you some idea of the relative wealth in the world. And that does support some of my friends who believe America is the final Babylon, because it talks about this vast empire, this final empire where the merchants of the world will weep when it goes away, when the final judgment comes. So I think that supports their view. Now, I know there are plenty of other people who have contrary views, and then there are still some other views, and so I'm not going to opine on exactly which view I think is the best, but I'm just saying is that you need to drill down into the facts sometimes, and it's very difficult to get Europe to where I think it needs to be. And that's why a lot of people are sort of looking through the prophetic scriptures and coming up some other things. Well, today we've titled this thing Watchmen. I want to read from Ezekiel 33 because I think this kind of defines where we are here at Fellowship Bible Chapel and why we talk about Bible prophecy every week. And I'm so appreciative of the fact that The leadership of the church gives me this opportunity. I do want you to know that the YouTube channel continues to do very well in terms of viewership. Since the first of the year, we've been getting about 3,000 views a day or so on the channel. We're up to about 4,300 subscribers. We get about 10 to 20 new subscribers every day. And we get plenty of comments, people telling me why things I need to do and things I could do better and things I should read and all that, and I appreciate all that advice. And then people tell me to sit down and shut up. But I'm not listening to them. So, verse 1 of Ezekiel 33. Again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him up for their watchman. And I've lost verse 2. If when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked away from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at thine hand. Nevertheless, if thou warn the wicked of his way to turn from it, if he do not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. Therefore, O thou son of man, speak unto the house of Israel, thus ye speak, saying, if our transgressions and our sins be upon us, and we pine away in them, how should we then live? Say unto them, as I live, saith the Lord, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye away from your evil ways, for why will you die, O house of Israel? And it goes on to talk about the fact that God doesn't take pleasure in the death of the wicked. And so we live at this time where it's important for people to be watchmen. And so as we see things going on in the world, we're going to warn you about those things, because then the responsibility passes from us to you. But if we knew all this stuff that was going on, and this is why it's so troubling to watch pastor after pastor after pastor ignore Bible prophecy, ignore what's going on in the world, and never say anything about it. I mean, never say anything about it. And not only not say anything about it, but mock the people who do say things about it. They are in for a very severe judgment. Now, I don't take pleasure in that, okay? They need to repent and change their ways. And then the people that are listening to these warnings, they also need to repent and change their ways. But we live at this time when there are things going on. For example, The Economist this week, this thing about transhumanism. This is the front page of the Washington Post this morning. The revolution will be digitized. Spearheaded by the flood of wearable devices, a movement to quantify consumers' lifestyles is evolving into big business with immense health and privacy ramifications. People are saying this technology thing, this is really great, but I think people are now saying, well, wait a minute, maybe it's not so great. And we'll see some of the dark side of that later. And then, of course, artificial intelligence, Economist has another cover about it this week. And you see the man, he's got the USB port built into the back of his head so they can upload some additional information to him. And there's great promise and great peril with what's going on. And the problem is that we're really, in my view, reconstituting the days of the Tower of Babel. when men think that they will create themselves as God. I've showed you the picture many times of the Time magazine cover from a couple years ago that was titled 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Now, this is a mainstream media news magazine talking about the fact that man plans to become immortal. People should wake up when they see that and say, now, wait a minute. Isn't that what was going on at the time of the Tower of Babel? And how did that work out? And then look at what happened in the days of Noah and the days of Lot with all the other things going on. And people ought to take notice. And that's why it's so troubling to me when I see so many people ignore it. And not only ignore it, mock it. I don't understand it. But this computer thing is very powerful. We'll talk about it. There's talk that some of our enemies could do sort of a cyber electromagnetic pulse attack, which would take down our power grid. It's relatively unprotected. It could be protected for a cost of about $2 to $10 billion. And nobody will appropriate the money for it. It's insane. We spend money on a lot of stuff that we don't need, I guess, like a lot more politicians. But I don't want to get political. That would be so uncharacteristic of me, I know. We've talked about Andy Stanley some, and in an interview about 6 years ago, somebody sent me this. He says this. Well, the question was, he was in an interview with Ed Stetzer of Lifeway, the Southern Baptist publishing arm, and Ed said, Andy, what do you think about preaching verse-by-verse messages through the books of the Bible? And Andy said this, quote, guys that preach verse-by-verse through books of the Bible, that is just cheating. It's cheating because that would be easy, first of all. That isn't how you grow people. And I think that should say, that isn't how you numerically grow people. No one in the scripture modeled that. There's not one example of that. I don't know what book he reads. Jesus taught the disciples the word daily. And you know what? Those disciples, if you look at the way John wrote the book of Revelation and all of the allusions throughout the book of Revelation to the Old Testament, he was not some ignorant backwater fisherman from a little tiny village. These guys knew the scripture. One pastor said this in response, there's a serious defect in a so-called minister content to be proud of assembling non-believers and calling them a church. Something deeply wrong there. Modern evangelicalism seems to exhaust every imaginable and unimaginable means to attract and collect non-Christians into a building and then call it a church and call it church growth. Maybe there's a better way to identify these places. Let's just call them non-churches or social clubs. Now, there's an organization out there called the One Campaign, and it talks about the different things that they're going to bring about. Actually, what I'm going to do, I think when I did something here at the beginning, let me just try something here. Okay, it didn't work, so never mind. I think I got it up a little bit too bright. But the One Campaign talks about they're going to take care of education. This is a international organization. Agriculture, maternal and child health, infectious diseases, water and sanitation, debt cancellation, trade and investment, Millennium Development Goals, energy, development assistance, transparency, energy. They're going to help control everything. And so this week, two men went to Washington and spoke to them mainly about how the One Campaign could work in taking care of AIDS. And that would have been Rick Warren and Elton John, who actually testified in front of Congress. Now, Pastor Steve mentioned about partnering with unbelievers. I'm just going to play you some of what Rick said and some of what Elton John said at that congressional testimony the other day in D.C. in front of Lindsey Graham. supposedly the great conservative from South Carolina.
As you know from your hearings previously, we are making a lot of progress on the pandemics like HIV, malaria, and TB. And while the momentum is headed in the right direction, now is the time to move for eradication. A lot of times in the third quarter of a game, people say, well, we know how the outcome's going to happen, so let's just let off the pedal, and they'll leave the game. We can't do that now. The Super Bowl is a good example of what happens in the last second of a game. And I believe that it will take three catalytic factors in order to eradicate HIV, malaria, and TB. First, we must form a new perspective on foreign assistance. Second, we must forge a new perspective or a new partnership in distribution. And third, we must fund a new priority in the budget, which would include ending sequestration. Now, if somebody saves your life, you have zero desire to terrorize them. And in my travels, I've observed that when poor countries are overwhelmed by these pandemics and they're stuck in poverty and they have no capital or create opportunities, they get resentful of nations with abundant resources that ignore their plight. And that resentment makes them right for angry ideologies. Now, the second catalyst in eradicating preventable diseases is we have to forge new partnerships in distribution. Sometimes you have to team tackle a player on a football field. He's so big, one person can't take him down. And this is where I call in to reference what I call the three legs of the stool. A one-legged stool will fall over, and a two-legged stool will fall over, but a three-legged stool will stand. I've been invited to speak at Davos World Economic Forum multiple times, and every time I hear people saying we need public and private partnerships. Whenever I hear that, I say, you're right, but you're only two-thirds of the way. You're leaving out the biggest sector, and that is the faith sector. It dwarfs the other two sectors. Let me put this in perspective. There are 600 million Buddhists in the world. There are 800 million Hindus in the world. There are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, and there are 2.3 billion Christians in the world. The actual number of people without faith is quite small outside of Manhattan and parts of Europe.
So I really encourage governments throughout the world who are, saying that homosexuality is a sin and everything like that. They are making their disease worse. In the long consequences for that for their country, their economy is going to suffer, and the disease will spread even further. It's inhumane, and it's inhumane to people who are suffering from this disease.
That's who Rick Warren is partnering with. Said he wished he was thinking about kissing him or something, I guess. So, unbelievable. I'm all for helping people, but dead people without the gospel are a bigger problem for the church. But this is what happened to the church. The church has changed, and now it's all about social gospel. Well, last Sunday in Garland, Texas, Pamela Geller, an activist from New York, had a conference about Muslim depictions of Muhammad. There was a contest, and they had pictures of Muhammad that had been painted, drawn over the centuries as part of their display there. Well, what happened was a couple of Muslim individuals who claimed inspiration from ISIS attacked, came there with guns. The FBI had 3 hours notice that they were coming, did not warn them. Talk about a watchman. Because in Washington they don't like Pamela Geller because she is very hard on Muslim ideology, radical Muslim ideology. Here's some interviews. She was on Hannity, interviewed by Eric Bolling the other night.
Welcome to Hannity. I'm Eric Bolling in for Sean. Free speech is under attack tonight in America. At the center of the latest controversy is Pamela Geller, who's being accused of provoking Muslim jihadists to attack a cartoon contest she organized in Texas. The more recent attempt to undermine or distort her intentions comes from the Associated Press. Last night, after Geller did an interview with the news service, it tweeted this out, quote, Pamela Geller says she has no regrets about Prophet Muhammad cartoon contest that ended in 2 deaths. Well, predictably, outrage followed, forcing the AP to clarify that tweet, because what Geller actually said was that she had no regrets. The event ended with gunfire and not deaths. That didn't stop groups like CARE from attacking her anyway. The American Islamic Organization lashed out at Geller with this tweet, quote, "Don't let Pamela Geller or her cabal confuse you. Drawing contest not about free speech." The tweet included a link to an article accusing Geller of being a peddler of hate. So here now to respond to the latest attacks on her character and intentions is author and columnist Pamela Geller. Pam, let's start with the CAP. You had that interview. Boy, that tweet they sent out after kind of was almost like judge, jury, and executioner all in one.
Yeah, well, I had not wanted to do that interview, but that's a whole other story. The question is, why is the media carrying water for the most radical and extreme ideology on the face of the earth? Why is the story about Pamela Geller? You have a situation where a free speech conference was attacked by 2 jihadists. The good news is that they were taken down before they could take out hundreds, and the police got access to their computers, and we broke open a cell, and they're gleaning data as we speak. So they would have struck somewhere else. I don't know how many others would have died in a less protected environment. So again, we have to ask the question, why aren't we talking about the motive of the jihadists? Why are we talking about Pamela Geller? Why is Pamela Geller the story? And one thing I just want to say, the Council of American Islamic Relations CARE, who is cited in every story about me, I'm not quoted, but they're always quoted, is a designated terrorist group by the UAE, is an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist funding trial in our nation's history, the Holy Land Foundation trial. And they were named a Muslim Brotherhood group, a front for Hamas. I want to know why the media has designated them some legitimate authority.
I'm not sure why some of the media are attacking you. They may not like you, Pam. They may not like what you have to say, but certainly you have the right to say what you say.
Yeah, we're having this conversation, and the military, for the first time since 9/11, just raised the level, the terror threat levels to the highest. Why are we talking about
Well, they raised it not to the highest level, they raised it to Bravo, which means increased and predictable threat of terrorism on all the military bases in America.
Since 9/11.
Well, okay, since 9/11, fair enough. Let me ask you this. The FBI, today we found out that the FBI gave Garland, Texas Police Department 3-hour notice that these 2 jihadists were on their way to your event. Did they tell you that?
They did not tell us that, and I believe the FBI has been disarmed in the information battle space because of groups like CARE, Islamic supremacist groups like CARE, that have demanded and gotten experts in jihadic doctrine.
Do you think the influence of CARE is affecting what the FBI does?
Unquestionably. Great Islamic scholars like Ibn Warwick and Robert Spencer, who used to talk about the jihadi threat, have been removed. And so how could they possibly, if you don't know who the enemy is, how could you find them?
So what do you say to the FBI, knowing that they knew 3 hours prior to Elton Simpson coming to perpetrate an attack on you, they didn't tell you?
What do I say to them? What I've been saying on my website for years, that they are disarmed, that the American people have to take their own safety in their own hands. The reason why I did this cartoon and art exhibit, it was an art exhibit, by the way, of Muhammad depicted over the past 1,400 years. Nobody talks about that. Why is that important? Because for 1,400 years, Muhammad was depicted and they weren't killing anybody. Why are they killing everybody now? Because they're imposing the Sharia. And this is the question that America faces. Will we submit to the Sharia, or will we stand for our basic principles?
So you're saying the FBI is, what did you say, disarmed? Is that what you said?
Disarmed in the information battle space.
It's fine, disarmed in the information battle space. Are you now disarmed in the free speech battle space? What are you going to do from here? Are you going to lay low, or are you going to do another cartoon contest?
If I lay low, I've given up. It's like the Hebdo cartoonist who said he won't draw Muhammad. I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to give up my freedom. I'm never going to give up the fight. And the one thing I do want to say is, for everything people are seeing in the media, I am receiving tens of thousands of emails of support. Don't stop. Thank you so much. There's a dichotomy between what the media is saying and what the American people are feeling.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Pam Geller, be safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, then Hannity the next night had on Radical Imam Chowdhury from Britain, who said this.
Radical jihadists tonight are calling for the head of Texas free speech event organizer Pamela Geller. A chilling online post reportedly written by an American jihadist warns that Geller cannot hide and that she will be killed for daring to hold a cartoon contest. Now, the post also claims that ISIS has trained over 70 fighters in 15 states right here in America who are ready to react. And anyway, joining us now to respond to these new threats against her life, Pam Geller, also with us, radical London Imam, and that's Anjem Chowdhury is back with us. Do you support this death threat against Pam Geller because she ran a free speech contest drawing cartoons of your prophet?
Let's be absolutely clear. We're not talking about Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. You're talking about people who deliberately had a competition to insult the messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
To make cartoons.
If you saw the cartoons
so
that
you
were
support
drawn,
the death.
If you saw the cartoons, just bear with me, Sean. If you saw the cartoons that Charlie Hebdo drew, you would understand the anger. And now this woman wants to draw cartoons or have people draw cartoons to insult the Prophet, knowing full well that this carries the death penalty in Islam. So definitely she's asking people to attack.
You support the death penalty for Pam Geller,
security on the day.
who doesn't eat, who's not Muslim. You support the death penalty because she had a cartoon contest. Is that how frail you are in your faith, that you feel so insecure that you cannot?
It's not about me. It's about the divine law.
Your prophet
Whoever
cannot
insults the
withstand a
messenger
cartoon
Muhammad
being drawn about him?
wasallam, that will carry capital punishment, Sean.
So
it's
you
not
want
about my personal views.
you support the death
I always
threat. You
quote
want
the
to kill
Quran
her
and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
You want her to die.
You know what? She should be put before a Sharia court and tried, and if found guilty, of course she will face capital punishment.
She's not.
Okay? Here was Megyn Kelly talking about the free speech.
Moments ago, I had the chance to speak with Eugene Volokh. He is one of the leading constitutional scholars in the United States. He teaches free speech law and a First Amendment clinic at UCLA School of Law. He clerked for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. His work is cited by the U.S. Supreme Court on the First Amendment. And he is also the founder and co-author of the Volokh Conspiracy blog, which is now on the Washington Post website and among the most widely read and respected legal blogs in the country. Professor, very good of you to be here tonight. So let's start with this. Was this protected speech or wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no exception under the First Amendment for blasphemy. There's no exception for speech that offends people because of their religious beliefs. People are free to express themselves this way. People are free to engage in even much more offensive speech than that.
And so when we see people like a news anchor at another network who has a law degree, but I don't think has practiced law, come out and tweet today saying hate speech is excluded from protection, and follows up with, don't just say you love the Constitution, read it. He is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing in the Constitution about hate speech. And if you look at the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution, Supreme Court has made clear that all viewpoints are protected under the First Amendment, regardless of whether they're hateful or otherwise. Even the Nazis are protected under the First Amendment. Even the KKK is protected under the First Amendment. And this speech is critical of a particular ideology. It's critical of Islam. In particular, it's critical of extremist Islam. But even beyond that, it's true that the organizers of the event think that Islam in general is in many ways dangerous and unsound. That is, they have every right to express that view, including by commissioning drawings of Muhammad. This is fully protected by the First Amendment. Everything the Supreme Court has said supports that.
We've seen that recently in the Westboro Baptist Church case that went up to the Supreme Court, in which 8-1, the U.S. Supreme Court sided with those people from the Westboro Baptist Church who were running around with signs saying God hates the F-A-G-S word at a dead man's funeral, at a soldier's funeral.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is in that case, there was speech. It was actually not right at the funeral, but about 1,000 feet away, but on occasion of a funeral. This was not the case in the with the Texas Art Show. That was speech that specifically targeted a private person for harsh condemnation. Not at all so with this show. That was speech that specifically talked about how it's a good thing. Thank God for dead soldiers, because that's God's righteous punishment, is to kill Americans. That's not this speech. speech. This speech is much less offensive than the speech that the Supreme Court in Snyder v. Phelps held was constitutionally protected. To be sure, the speech is offensive to some Muslims who think that any depiction of Muhammad is offensive. Well, the law is not made by religious groups that get to say, well, this speech is blasphemy, we get to shut you up over that. There is no exception for blasphemy. There is no exception for even hate speech, which this speech, I think, is not.
And what of the people who say, well, even if it's allowed, it shouldn't be done because it has no value, this type of discussion at this type of event?
Well, surely this kind of discussion does have value. It has value in debate about Islam and about the role of Islam and about the reaction of some Muslims. Fortunately, only a small portion of Muslims to these kinds of things. But beyond that, it has value as a reaffirmation of our free speech rights. It has value as an act of defiance. It has value of people saying, look, we are not going to be shut up. When you tell us that we cannot draw
Well, where it's going, I mean, you heard Elton John about government shouldn't say this is sin. The left is going to support hate speech laws if you speak out against homosexuality, against same-sex marriage, all of these things. It's coming, folks. It's here. People are talking about it. It's mainstream. This is the editorial page the other day from the New York Times. Free speech versus hate speech. Listen to what they said at this. There's no question that images ridiculing religion, however offensive they may be to believers, qualify as protected free speech in the United States and most Western democracies. There's also no question that however offensive the images, they do not justify murder, and that is incumbent upon leaders of all religious faiths to make this clear to their followers. But it is equally clear that the Muhammad art exhibit and contest in Garland, Texas was not really about free speech. It was an exercise in bigotry and hatred, posing as a blow for freedom. So the New York Times doesn't support free speech. If they say they do, they're lying. It's that simple. Okay? Charlie Hebdo is a publication whose stock and trade has always been graphic satires of politicians and religions, whether Catholic, Jewish, or Muslim. They were never attacked by Catholics. They were never attacked by Christians. They were never attacked by Jews. By contrast, Pamela Geller, the anti-Islam campaigner behind the Texas event, has a long history of declarations and actions motivated purely by hatred for Muslims. They're so prescient. They know exactly what motivates her. Whether fighting against the planned mosque near Ground Zero, posting to her venomous blog Atlas Shrugs, or organizing the event in Texas, Ms. Geller revels in assailing Islam in terms reminiscent of virulent racism or anti-Semitism. By the way, remember years ago, the ACLU defended Nazis marching in Skokie, Illinois? They picked Skokie, Illinois because there was a disproportionately large share of Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. That's why they marched there. And these people never said one word about it. Not one. But speak the truth of Islam and you're automatically a bigot. Speak the truth about same-sex marriage, you're a bigot. This is what happens to Watchmen in the last days. She achieved her provocative goal in Garland. The event was attacked by two Muslims who were shot to death by a traffic officer before they killed anyone. Those two men were would-be murderers. But their thwarted attack or the murderous rampage of the Charlie Hebdo killers or even the greater threat posed by the barbaric killers of the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda cannot justify blatantly Islamophobic provocations like the Garland event. These people, they've lost their minds. These can only serve to exacerbate tensions and to give extremists more fuel. It's our fault, Rick Warren, because if we're nice to them, they never have terrorists. Even he's lost his mind. I hate this, boy. Goes to Steve Mitchell at fbchapel.com, the mail. Some of those who draw cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad may earnestly believe they are striking a blow for the freedom of expression, though it is hard to see how that goal is advanced by inflicting deliberate anguish on millions of devout Muslims who have nothing to do with terrorism. Well, then maybe they won't be offended. As for the Garland event, to pretend that it was motivated by anything other than hate is simply hogwash, and I would say sometimes you identify your own, the character of your own editorials in your editorials. This is hogwash. So we have the situation. So now I'm going to look a little bit at the Middle East. I'm going to come back to this. This ISIS thing is continuing to grow. Syria continues to melt down. 2/3 of the people either have left the country or are internally displaced. Damascus is in ruins. Aleppo is in ruins. Homs is in ruins. All the major cities of Syria. Now I'm reading that on the Israeli national news that along the border here of this is where Beirut, Lebanon would be. This is where Haifa would be. So this is Lebanon here. And along the border here, this is the Bekaa Valley, major drug-producing place, terrorism place. This, of course, is the Golan Heights. But along here, along the Syrian-Lebanese border, troops are massing. Listen to what the article says. The Kalom Mountains, like Mount Hermon at their southern end, which is actually partly in Israel, are covered with snow in the winter. That prevents the most wide-ranging or significant military activity involving the transportation of soldiers and either heavy or medium-sized weapons. Infantry, however, carrying light arms can move around the area fairly easily. So what's happening is they're massing these forces on the border, and they said the conclusion of this article, let's see, these Syrian rebel groups, being the first, have appeared on the scene in order to build fortifications, take positions, and prepare for a westward offensive push into the Lebanon. From the west, Hezbollah has been streaming forces into the area to block the rebels and force them out of Lebanon. And so what they're saying is that what they expect, at least some of the military experts are saying, is that the bloodbath that you've seen in Syria will be repeated on a much larger scale throughout Lebanon. That whole situation over there is in meltdown. Question asked by this Middle East security report issued by the Institute for Study of War: is Assad a viable partner against the Islamic State, or the least worst option for U.S. national interest in Syria? And the answer to that question was no. He's not either. He cannot control the territory that was Syria or win the Syrian war decisively. The Assad regime is Iran's strategic asset in Syria, and Assad's brutal tactics and humanitarian abuses have accelerated the growth of jihadist groups regionally and globally. And now, by most estimates, over 1 million Syrian refugees are moving into Western countries. You think the FBI is going to, they didn't warn Pam Geller. You think they're going to give you a warning about the people streaming in, that some come in across our border, some that are brought in through the front door? The Islamic State, this is an interesting issue. This is a map, here's a little bit better one, that was in one of the Business Insider, showing the different areas that really what's happening is ISIS is expanding its control, and it's not doing, things aren't going well. They've even moved into Damascus and some of the cities in the western part of Syria along the Mediterranean, in Homs, in Damascus, and the map shows these areas. What's interesting is that a version of the map was put out by our government. Here it is. The interesting thing is that they cut off all the western part when they put it out, because they didn't want people to know how bad it was. But people asked questions about it, and in response to being caught with their fingers in the cookie jar, the government said the document was not meant to be a detailed tactical map. It is simply a graphic used to explain the overall situation. Well, there was one other important thing I want to talk about this week is related to all this terrorism and that type of thing. The FBI chief had a meeting in Washington, and he said this. This is James Comey, head of the FBI, the other day speaking to law enforcement organizations across the country.
Counterterrorism tops our list. It is our responsibility across the nation, including here in Mississippi. We spend all day, every day, worrying about the variety of ways in which the terrorism threat has morphed, most prominently since I became director a year and 5 months ago, in the growth of this group of savages that we call ISIL. And it is a group of people bent on horrific acts of violence in Iraq and Syria and around the world. We are focused keenly on who would be looking to travel to join this band of murderers, who will have come back from Iraq and Syria to the United States, and who, if they're not going to travel, might be inspired to engage in acts of violence because of some sixth sense that meaning can be found there in partnership with these ISIL savages. So that is a mission we are about in all 56 of our field offices. We have open cases all over the place focused on this threat. And so it is not a New York thing, it's not a Washington thing. It is something we focus on throughout the FBI. And we do that with the folks who are represented here today. Our Joint Terrorism Task Forces are at the heart of our commitment to keep the American people safe and remain, I was going to say as important. Frankly, I think they remain more important than they were 10 years ago, given the dispersed nature of the threat we face and the way it comes at us in a hard-to-detect form through the internet. Any place there are troubled souls who might be susceptible to the poisonous propaganda and training that's offered through the internet by groups like ISIL and other progeny of Al-Qaeda, any place with troubled souls like that potentially has an issue. And Mississippi is a great state, but like all 50 states, it has troubled souls who might look to find meaning in this sick, misguided way. The challenge we face in law enforcement is that they may be getting exposed to that poison and that training in their basement. And so they're not going to a physical space where they're meeting terrorists or communicating overseas in a way that we can intercept. They're sitting there consuming, and they may emerge from their basement to kill people of any sort, which is the call of ISIL. Just kill somebody. If you can videotape it, all the better. If it's law enforcement, all the better. If you can cut somebody's head off and get it on tape, what a wonderful thing in their view of the world. That is a challenge we face everywhere.
And it's a convergence of things. Look, when this happened in Garland, Texas, some of the Christian blogs were immediately saying, oh, it's a false flag, it's fake. It's fake, it's our government doing it. And I'm just telling you, every time something like this happens now, there are plenty of people out there saying, oh, it's just a false flag. It's a false flag, didn't happen. It's really just the government. It's just a plot. It's a plot of the global Zionist conspiracy and that type of thing. And eventually, that stuff makes it so you can't reason at all when that's all you watch and listen to. And you ignore real true evil that's in the world. Here's a couple reports building off what the FBI director said, James Comey, that there's hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people across all 50 states. They have active investigations going on, but they're difficult to detect, and you'll see why in just a moment. But here's just a few quick little reports sort of pieced together to show you that.
News from our great team at the Pentagon. Security threat level has been raised at the U.S. military bases across the country. Jennifer Griffin is live. She's the one that first broke this news. Jennifer, what do you know?
Well, Jenna, what we know is that the force protection level has gone up to Bravo. It was ordered by the head of U.S. Northern Command due to unspecified terror threats based on recent activities of ISIS online, as well as threats to military personnel. I'm being told by spokesmen for the DoD as well as for Northcom that this was a prudent measure. It is not due to a specific terrorist threat, but a general terrorist threat based on the current situation with ISIS. Remember, the FBI director, James Comey, yesterday mentioned that there are ISIS cells here in the United States, and they have made threats online against U.S. military personnel. So this was a prudent measure. What it means in real terms is that there will be more guards at bases, more identification required to enter the Pentagon as well as military bases. It's going to mean long lines outside of bases with people showing two forms of military ID. There will be random exercises and drills. But what's significant about this, Jenna, is that this is the highest threat level since the 10th anniversary of 9/11. So it does show that there is very real concern about the ISIS threat, and that it basically the commander of Northern Command, NORAD, who is in charge of the base protection here in the United States, feels that it is wise at this time to raise the awareness and threat protection level to Bravo, and that's what he has essentially done today.
And just to be clear, Jennifer, is it just domestically that we're looking at military bases, or is this worldwide?
Well, right now, the order came from U.S. Northern Command, NORAD, NORTHCOM, and so it affects U.S. bases domestically. I'm not sure at this moment in time whether it also applies to bases overseas. They may have already been at a heightened threat assessment level because of all of the events that have been happening in Europe and elsewhere overseas. So I think what's new about this is that the domestic U.S. bases have been raised in terms of to level Bravo.
It's been a fast-moving week. We had that shooting in Texas on Sunday, a lot of different reports about ISIS and their presence here in the United States. Now we hear this on Friday. So certainly a lot of news to take in and continue to report on. Jennifer, thank you very much.
70 years since victory in Europe. Today marks that, Chris. And they've made it clear, really, in ISIS has made it more clear than, say, Al-Qaeda did. Remember, Al-Qaeda used to strike anything. They struck at the Pentagon, which was military. They struck at the financial center downtown. They were headed to the Congress. So they had all. This bunch seems to believe they can get more recruits if they say, we're targeting the military. We're targeting the ones who've been hurting Muslims in Muslim lands.
Yeah, but then look at what happened in Garland. There was no military involved there. As you say, it was the cartoon contest drawing pictures of Muhammad. I got to say, I thought the briefing yesterday, and I wasn't there, I just read about it, by FBI Director James Comey was about as alarming as anything I've heard. I mean, he talked about hundreds or thousands of these homegrown terrorists who are being recruited over the Internet. They are on open websites, and they are directed to encrypted websites that the FBI director admitted that we can't break through, where they are directed to find something to attack. It used to be in the good old days, if you will, that they were vetted, but now, in effect, what ISIS and other jihadist groups are saying is kill somebody in the name of us. So it seems almost like it's random, but just go out and kill somebody and then say you did it because you were instructed to by us. And one of the other points Comey made is, with all of this going on, we try to draw a distinction. Are they inspired by? Were they directed by? He says that doesn't mean anything anymore because they're just going out and trying to recruit people to go do their worst.
New Attorney General Loretta Lynch weighed in.
We've seen social media being used in a number of cases, and it really is an expansion of how the Internet has been used, frankly, for several years now, both in recruitment and radicalization of young people to join terrorist groups.
But the details released by FBI Director James Comey are even more unnerving.
Comey told reporters that there's been a dramatic change in the way terrorists are recruited. And what they see is guys getting on the web and connecting through social media with ISIS, and then ISIS redirects them to encrypted communications. They go dark, and that leaves the FBI effectively blind to their activities.
In the last 2 days, the Independent and Guardian newspapers in England have both run this story: boys are in a mess. Absent fathers, well, here's some quotes from that article. In the UK today, a young person is more likely to have a television in their bedroom than a father in their house by the end of their childhood. More likely. And even if fathers are around, their sons don't engage with them much. Boys spend 44 hours in front of a TV smartphone or computer screen for every half hour in conversation with their fathers. Zimbardo, this is a professor emeritus at Stanford who wrote this report, replies that everybody needs a mother and father because they give different kinds of love. Mothers give love unconditionally because you came out of her body. A mother loves you. You bring home your report card and it's all C's. Mom will say it's okay. Mama loves you anyway. Try harder. Just for the record, my mama didn't do that, but these boys, they're in a terrible state, and I can't imagine that it's going to get better anytime soon. Fathers have a different approach. You know, they tell their kid to shape up or get out. Well, here's what it says. Fathers give love provisionally. If you want your allowance, if you don't want to turn off your computer, then you've got to perform. That's always been a deal with fathers and sons. You don't get a pass just because you exist. You're going to do it because you want your father to love and admire you. That central source of extrinsic motivation is gone now for almost 1 out of every 2 kids. That's pretty troubling. Now, here's a little report from ABC Nightline about how ISIS is going. We'll close with this because you can't take any more, I know.
In this online production mimicking the extremely popular Grand Theft Auto video game, ISIS terrorists sell adventure with murder and mayhem as fun. The subtitles brashly say, "Your games. We do the same actions in the battlefields." The terrorists are using more than just video games. They're using hip-hop to lure young recruits to the front lines of a deadly war. They're marketing smiling children, selling a false version of life under ISIS rule, even using a fighter, online messaging slick. Far broader and more subtle than the vicious beheading videos the public is more familiar with. The production values top-notch, as good as any commercial you can see in the U.S. Top law enforcement officials tell ABC News the country faces an unprecedented threat, the most sophisticated marketing and social media campaign ever devised by a terrorist organization.
They are shooting out into the ethersphere thousands and thousands of messages a day, over 90,000 messages a day.
John Carlin heads the Justice Department's National Security Division. He warns that ISIS productions are a new threat that every American family needs to be aware of.
And it's to millions of people across the globe. And what they're trying to do is convince young people to go over and ultimately slaughter civilians in a vicious war.
Skype, Facebook, Twitter, Mujahideen tweets. ISIS is using every social media tool available. We sat down with social media and marketing expert Scott Talon of American University to analyze the diverse messaging in the ISIS videos.
This is sophisticated. This is Madison Avenue meets documentary filmmaking meets news channel with PR sensibilities and a marketing value. They're using sort of Western tools and techniques and appropriate them for their purposes against the West.
Like those videos appealing to the hip-hop generation.
For those people that are on the edge, this could have a lot of resonance. You're speaking to them in a language they understand, video, moving imagery, and music. And then this message comes in about, we want you. People do want to belong to tribes, and this is saying, join our tribe. They're using products from American culture, video games, for their purposes and making a message that works for them. So it's the reverse of our culture, where we say escape real life and play a game. They're saying escape your life, come play a real game with real consequences where we are.
The real consequences for many is death. Hundreds of Western fighters, including a few Americans, have died on the battlefields of Iraq and Syria. ISIS sometimes tries to hide its darker side with softer messages like this one. An ISIS fighter checking on wounded comrades in the hospital.
Handsome, young fighter, baseball cap on backwards. In some ways, how could you not like this? He's not killing people, he's checking on people.
And it's working. New alleged ISIS recruits in the U.S. are being discovered with increasing frequency. In the last 2 years alone, more than 53 Americans have been charged with trying to support ISIS or traveling to Syria to join the fight. According to John Carlin, in most cases, there's a common thread.
In almost every one of these cases, we've seen social media involved. before the advent of this new technology and the growth of social media, how would you reach into the basements and bedrooms of American homes?
Shannon Conley of Denver was 19 years old when she started an online relationship with ISIS.
She was Skyping with an ISIS fighter.
No, that's right. We're seeing social media being used by the terrorists the way it's used by those who use it for innocent purposes.
In another case, a 20-year-old Alabama woman ran off last year to join ISIS in Syria. She is believed to be still with ISIS. It's a campaign so effective, it's insidiously reaching into the most unexpected corners. This U.S.-born Air Force vet is accused of trying to travel to Syria to fight with ISIS. The FBI says it found 180 ISIS propaganda videos on his laptop. Sources acknowledge privately that the U.S. government is struggling to meet this new threat.
Let's face it, we invented the internet. We invented these social network sites. We've got Hollywood. We've got the capabilities, as Mr. Sheikh was saying, to blow these guys out of the water from a standpoint of communications.
Officials from the highest levels of government tell me they may need to recruit advertising experts to help combat ISIS propaganda.
Because when people know what this group is really about and what it's really doing, killing, enslaving, raping, and stealing, they're not going to want to join the group.
But until the West can counter ISIS online, the recruits are likely to keep pouring into Syria and to possibly threaten the homeland. The frightening thing, the online messaging campaign continues right now as this story airs. 90,000 jihadist postings in the next 24 hours. This is Pierre Thomas for Nightline in Washington.
From the front page of the Washington Post this morning, the U.S. is struggling to degrade the terrorists via Twitter. That's our response. Send out some tweets. So look, what do you make all of this? We live in a very serious time. It's time for everybody to take responsibility for your own family and safety of your own family. You have to work out how that plays out. But you need to plan. You need to think about it. It's not pleasant, but God said it would be as in the days of Noah. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So I'm not as optimistic as Mr. Carlin, who's an assistant U.S. Attorney General. I don't think if people learn about ISIS that it's going to make much difference. They learn and they go anyway. And we have a cultural thing of absent fathers in the West, and it only breeds that. It's a crisis. You know, in 1965, Daniel Patrick Moynihan was called a racist because he was complaining that in the African American community in those days, 1 out of 6 or 7 babies were born out of wedlock. About 15%. It's now 72% in white communities. It's over 50. We have a major problem. Major problem. The only solution is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we need to be prepared for whatever God has for us. God will take care of us. He'll deliver us. He'll give us the ability to get through anything. Anything at all. Whatever that is. And all we should be concerned about is whether what we do glorifies Him. That's all we have to worry about. May God be glorified by whatever circumstances He puts us in and how we react to that. And may we all stand as faithful witnesses regardless of whatever that is as we get further and further down the road. Because I really do think this is the end times. And so let's pray and let's prepare our hearts. Lord, just prepare our hearts for living and standing for you to your glory in these last days. Give us strength, keep us in the Word, give us fellow believers around us, like-minded, to help each other in these times. Give us the strength, give us the resources, and again, God, everything for your glory, please provide for us. And we thank you for your word that tells us what's coming so we can prepare. And give us the strength that we need. In Jesus' name, amen.